Hello everybody and welcome back to another Fear the Walking Dead video, and today I'll be talking about the top 10 best episodes that we've got on Fear the Walking Dead. And with the show now over, this will be my definitive list for the best episodes of Fear. So let's dive right into this with number 10, Season 5, Episode 3. And I may not like Season 5 as a whole, but I feel like this is the one good episode. That's because we get reintroduced to Dwight, and this episode is just fun. I really like John Dorie in this episode, and some people may not like it, but the weird Walker kill at the end with John splitting the bullet on Dwight's axe was very entertaining. This episode is a very entertaining episode. I don't really have much to say negative about this episode, because they focus on only the good characters and they bring back Dwight in a very interesting way. I just really personally like this episode, and it definitely deserves to be mentioned at least. So number 9 is Season 6, Episode 3, and this is another Dwight episode, and this is the episode where you have Dwight and Al, and it's the CRM episode, and it's also the Sherry Returns episode. And the reason why I like this episode so much is because, first of all, I felt they did Sherry's return very well. Even though I don't like Sherry now, in the episode, I was excited to see Sherry again. Also, the Al and Dwight pairing is just amazing. It's a shame they didn't do more of it because those two characters were just great together. And I just really liked the premise of the episode with them going to this tower and then everyone got this bubonic plague and it's like the rats are the real thing. And I just really liked how you had our characters not dealing with the threat of the walkers, but it was a bit like a mini sickness arc like they did in Season 4 of The Walking Dead. I just really liked that we had this extra thing add on to this episode, which was everyone's getting sick, and by the end of the episode, I think also Dwight ended up getting sick, and even though they cured it by the end of the episode, they could have done more of it. It was a very interesting episode. And moving on to number 8 is Season 4, Episode 1, and this might be controversial, but I enjoy this episode. I think this episode does great at moving Morgan from The Walking Dead to Fear, and I do like we get those cameos with Rick, Carol, and Jesus. That is very great. Also, the introduction to John Dorie, amazing, and I really like this episode just because it adds that mystery of what happened to the Fear cast, where are they, and then when the episode ends, Morgan and company are held at gunpoint by the Fear characters. It is just amazing setup and a very gripping episode from start to finish. Moving on to number 7, and it is Season 3, Episode 12. And this episode is just insane. This is the episode where Troy sends the army to the ranch. We get characters dying left, right, and center. We get some amazing battles. And I just really enjoy this episode. It is just so crazy. This episode, it kind of works as more of a two-parter because, episode 13 is also fantastic. But I feel like this is the stronger of the two just because of the chaos that this episode has. And in The Walking Dead, these type of episodes will be saved for the formula of 1, 8, or 9, 16. But with Fear at the time, these big episodes were just randomly in the season. And this is such a fantastic episode. Characters like Nick, Alicia, and Troy just get their time to shine. This is just an episode that's gripping from start to finish. And at number 6 is Season 8, Episode 4. It might be controversial to have this here, but I really enjoy this episode. And that's because I'm a massive Morgan fan. And I have this episode take us back to when we first ever met Morgan. It is just perfect. This doesn't feel like a Fear episode. This feels like a final season of The Walking Dead, or an episode we should have gotten in the final season of The Walking Dead. We get so many references to episode 1 of The Walking Dead. This doesn't really connect to the story of Fear. This is more about Morgan, and it just finishes off that massive character arc that he's been going through for 13 years. And it just completes Morgan's story, and this just makes me really happy to be a Morgan fan, to finally get that closure we had on Morgan. We did have 2 more episodes of Morgan to set him up to fully move on past all the trauma, but this episode is just perfect and amazingly acted and carried by Lenny James. I absolutely love this episode and the references. This is like the diamond in the rough for Season 8. I absolutely think Season 8 is trash, but this one episode is just miles above the rest of the season. Number 5 is Season 3, Episode 16, and this episode is just fantastic. It is build up and the stakes are so high. It's a shame that the next episode, Season 5, Episode 1, was a reboot and didn't carry on the story that this episode sets up. But this episode itself is just so fun. We have the bit where Strand screwed everyone over. You have Proctor John taking over the dam. And it really does look like you're going to lose one of the Clarks. But we don't end up doing it. But in this episode, it is amazing. And also, Daniel gets shot in the face and just carries on like a badass. And eventually ends up saving Nick. This episode was everything that was great about Fear. This was Fear at its peak. I feel like season 3 Fear was amazing, and this just encapsulated that feeling of just how good Fear was at the time. And the ending was very ambiguous of who survived. I liked that. It is just a shame again, Fear season 4 episode 1 just rebooted it and ignored this episode and all the setup it had. Like, we definitely should have got to carry on in season 4 to at least explain how everyone survived that, instead of being like, oh yeah, they just survived. But moving on to number 4, and it's season 6 episode 4. And this episode is just amazing. And I really like this episode. Focuses on John Dorie. He's my favourite character. And they give him this massive episode, Time to Shine. And I like how they used his police officer background in this episode to make it a mystery episode too. I really like mysteries. And this episode was great with John Dorie kind of going through, slowly putting things together and figuring out what happened. That is amazing. I just really think this episode was just perfect for John Dorie's character. It just developed him in such a great way. This episode was gripping from start to finish. I feel like the mystery at the end was a little underwhelming. I just didn't like how just suddenly died. I just didn't like that bit, but it was a great episode, and it deserves to be in the top 4. But moving on to number 3, and it's season 3, episode 1. This is where Fear found its stride. We get some amazing scenes in this episode, like Travis fighting walkers in a pit. We get to see Troy for the first time. We see Madison go mama bear on Troy and almost rip out his eye. This episode is just absolutely amazing. Like, every character gets something interesting to do outside of Alicia. This is still before she got her time to shine. That's the one down. And I feel like maybe at the end the walkers just kind of rush into the Iron Base all of a sudden. That kind of ruins it a little. It's just like, where do these walkers all suddenly come from? But this episode is a fantastic start to easily the best season of Fear the Walking Dead. Number 2 is season 2 episode 14. This might be a shocker for some people because it's not really up there, but for me, I absolutely love this episode. And that's because Travis was my favourite character in the first 3 seasons, and I absolutely hated Chris. So the episode focused around Travis trying to find out, where's Chris and how did he die? And the big reveal of how he died and Travis just absolutely snapping is perfect. The build-up is amazing. And then when Travis snaps, it is just completely gory and just so brutal. And that's easily my favourite moment in all of Fear. That moment where Travis just snaps. And this episode is just absolutely perfect. And that moment when Travis breaks, just wow. And I just frequently still think about this episode. If I think about Fear, I most likely think about this episode, like the moment where Travis is like, so was he thrown out the car or did you drag him out? It is just absolutely perfect. But what is better than this? At number 1, it has to be season 6 episode 1. This episode saved Fear in my opinion. This set up the second great golden era of Fear. Sadly, it was only a couple episodes long, but it was still, this episode was absolutely just amazing. I'm a massive Morgan fan, so big win. Also, this episode fixed Morgan. Morgan for me was broken from season 7 of The Walking Dead, and Fear just kind of continued to use broken Morgan. Then this episode came and fixed Morgan and made him a great character. I thought he was okay until I saw this episode, and I was like, yep, I'm a massive Morgan fan again. And the bounty hunter character was absolutely amazing too. It's a shame he's only in 1 episode, but the time he was in was great. The supporting cast in this episode is very good. I really like the story, how basic it is. This episode's just written so well and acted perfectly. And the end of this episode, where you see Virginia and Morgan talking over the walkie-talkie, and Morgan's like, Morgan Jones is dead. You're dealing with something else now. That just gives me chills. It's a shame they didn't go to the lengths that I wanted to in the later episodes with the setup of this Morgan. But it was absolutely perfect from start to finish. And just because, in my opinion, this episode saved Fear, at least for a couple more seasons, it deserves to be number 1. But please tell me down below, do you agree with my list of my personal top 10? Or do you disagree? And if you disagree, what are your top 10 best episodes of Fear the Walking Dead? But this is it for me today. So goodbye, peace out. I'll see you next time.